For some context, I live in a major city and currently don't do a lot of driving due to ongoing issues with my car. The pandemic has also made me turn more to delivery apps in general anyway. So, the other day around 1 p.m., I decided to order some lunch after doing quite a lot of cleaning. I placed the Uber Eats order and found something to watch while I waited for the food to arrive. Within just a few minutes, a driver accepted my order, and I noticed right away that the driver, Anthony, was apparently on a bike, didn't have a profile picture, and also didn't have any deliveries on record. At first, I wasn't very alarmed at all. I was almost sort of amused, like, oh wow, I guess I'm this person's first ever customer. Then though, a full 30 minutes passed by, with no driver movement on the app. At this point, I thought something must be glitching out or the driver might be stuck somewhere. I contacted the support via the chat option, and they ended up assigning a new driver, because they couldn't reach the first one at all. Odd, but whatever. Now is when it starts to get a little bit weirder. The new driver was assigned in the exact same spot as the original driver was. They were also apparently on a bike and also had no profile picture. They had no prior deliveries as well. This driver's name was Lori. I let another 20 minutes or so pass by with no driver movement at all before I decided to message them myself. Hi there, are there any issues with the order? The app showed that the driver had seen the message, but I never got a response. All this time, I was checking to see if Uber Eats was maybe experiencing some issues, but I couldn't find anything on the subject. At this point, though, while I was definitely weirded out, I was mostly just really hungry. I contacted support once again to request some assistance. They reassigned the driver once more and apologized for the inconvenience. Same deal when they tried to contact the driver. No response. Finally, a third driver was assigned in the exact same scenario. Same spot, on a bike, no profile picture, no prior deliveries. Only this time, the name was Robert. Before I could react and go on about canceling the order at this point because I was getting tired of dealing with this, suddenly he had my food and immediately messaged me the following. Hello, have your food. What's your phone number? I responded right away with, I'm not super comfortable giving my phone number out when you can just message me on here. He responded once more. What's your number? Be there in 10. How old are you, by the way? At this point, the alarm bells are going off. I contacted support immediately to have the order canceled and get further assistance. I got connected with Uber's safety team, who informed me that the order had been canceled, I'll be refunded, and started taking down the details of the strange interactions. As I was giving the woman on the phone the info she needed, I was starting to calm down, thinking this was just some creep playing a prank or something, when I suddenly heard a man's voice at the door. Miss Metal Gear 4 2069, I have your food. I can't even begin to describe the chill that went down my spine because of the way he said it. Making things even worse, the Uber safety woman on the phone with me heard him as well. Is that him? We already canceled the order. I poked my head around the door. The main heavy door was open. The metal screen door was closed and locked but allowed us to see one another. I got a look at him, and when he saw that I was on the phone, he went immediately from smiling to looking furious. He suddenly got right up against the door and kept demanding to know who I was on the phone with. At this point, I've started asking him to please leave because he was making me uncomfortable, but he just kept getting more and more angry. He started pounding on my door, grabbing at the doorknob while shouting to be let in. The woman on the phone was quite concerned, asking if I was okay. The man was still shouting, so I was basically in full meltdown mode at this point. I hurriedly closed the heavy door to lock it. The man was becoming borderline belligerent as he kicked at my door. The woman told me to hang up and call police. He ended up walking away from my house about a minute later and back up to the sidewalk. For a moment, I thought he fucked off, so I finally finished my conversation with the Uber safety woman so she could finish submitting the report. Once she did, I called the police and told them what happened. They weren't exactly incredibly helpful at first since he didn't actually break in or put his hands on me. They told me to just call back if he came again and they would send an officer out. I ended up having to call them again and give a report plus full description of the man, since he didn't end up actually leaving right away. Instead, he lingered around the neighborhood for almost 20 minutes. According to one of my neighbors, after she heard the yelling, she saw the man I described walk back up from my house to the sidewalk and hop into a truck with another man in the passenger seat. Apparently, they just sat there staring at people walking by and being incredibly sketchy. That's when she walked back towards my house and asked me what happened. Luckily, she was able to give myself and the cop a description of the vehicle, and the other man as well. So, basically, this was a very bizarre and uncomfortable experience. I wanted to share it and see if maybe anyone has ever experienced anything like this. Honestly, I'm pretty shaken up, and will be avoiding delivery apps for quite a while after this. This is going to be pretty tame compared to a lot of the great ones I've read here, but since it happened to me, I think it's pretty spooky. I'm definitely at least buying a doorbell camera ASAP. Now I'm writing this only a few hours after everything just happened. Now that I've calmed down a bit and the sun is coming up, I feel somewhat safer now. Last night I was laying in bed, reading a little before I went to sleep. I think it's important to clarify that I live on the outskirts of my town. It's still technically in town, but definitely right on the edge, off the highway that leads out of town and into a 15-mile-long stretch of lots of country. Woods, fields, a few residencies, but mostly just open highway. So other than the other tenants in my actual apartment building, it's normally very quiet in my area. My building is a square with 4 apartments, and for each of us, our door simply faces out into the open. There's no lobby or foyer or anything. My door in particular looks out into a large field that goes up a hill. I don't remember the exact time, but sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., someone started randomly banging on my door. Now, this freaks me out at the best of times in broad daylight, but especially in the middle of the night. I nervously went to ask who it was. Some guy with a deep voice called through the door, claiming he was a police officer and that I needed to let him in. That's exactly what he said, too. I needed to let him in, not that he needed my assistance or that I needed to open the door. Luckily, I watch and listen to a lot of true crime stuff, so I got pretty suspicious real quick. I just got near instant alarm bells because he just couldn't tell me why I needed to let him in. He wouldn't tell me what I supposedly did either, and never even asked what my name was. He also really didn't sound like a cop, if you know what I mean. Obviously, I was feeling creeped out, so I called real 911 to confirm there was actually an officer at my address. They pointed out right away that there was not. At this point, I was freaking out. I kind of called out through the door that I'm on the phone with the police. The guy just kind of bangs on my door one more time, then stops making noise altogether. I presume because he ran off at this point. They dispatched 2 cars to my apartment, and the officers took a good look around. Unfortunately, the guy was long gone by the time they got there, and I'd never actually seen him, so I didn't have a description of him I could give or anything. The cops at least said 2 things to make me feel better, though. 1, they'd post more patrols in my area over Halloween weekend, and 2, it was most likely a Halloween prank, because the bar down the street from my apartment had a party, and it just closed not too long before this happened. The moral of the story is always trust your instincts, and remember that if you have any doubts about someone claiming to be a police officer, call 911 and confirm they're who they say they are. Dispatch and the officers who came tonight told me you will not get in trouble for making sure the person you're talking to is actually an officer. This also applies to situations where it's nighttime and dark, so you can't really see for sure if it's a real cop car behind you or not. If you see flashing lights behind you on a back road or a dark area at night, put on your hazard lights and call 911 first to make sure it's actually a cop car. You won't get in trouble, I promise. Better safe than sorry. This happened a long time ago. At the time, I was living alone in a first-floor apartment. My girlfriend had been sick at the time and ended up in the hospital dealing with a rare disease. Thankfully, she recovered just fine from it, but during those weeks, my life was pretty much go to work, go to the hospital to be with her, then come back to the house for dinner and go to bed. This was a Friday night and I was all alone, so I decided to distract myself by reading and watching some videos on YouTube. Hours passed by, and at 3 a.m. I was in bed with my iPad in hand, just about to fall asleep. Then I heard it. I knew that sound pretty well. You see, outside, right in front of my bedroom door, there was a long corridor that led directly to the kitchen. This apartment was in a building built in the 50s, and the kitchen door was really old and had become slightly bent. That meant that whenever you turned the doorknob to open the door, it would snap out of its place with a distinct clacking sound, and that was the sound I had just heard. A lot of thoughts ran through my mind in that exact moment. Had I dreamt about it in a semi-sleeping state perhaps? Or maybe the sound was real, but what happened was that the doorknob internal mechanism broke and it opened by itself. Or, of course, maybe someone was in my house, and they had just opened the door. At this point, my heart was racing, and I started considering my options. I did have a broomstick next to my bed. You may ask why I had it there, and to be honest, I had it exactly because I lived alone. I thought one day I might be in a situation like this, where I would need a weapon. My girlfriend even used to tease me about it, but I guess my paranoia was now paying off in the most unfortunate of situations. I decided to grab the stick in one hand and grab my cell phone in the other. My plan was to open my bedroom door while calling 911, and if no one else was in the apartment, I would just apologize to the operator on the other end of the line and explain the situation. Back in those days, though, my cell phone wasn't yet a smartphone. It did have this feature I found somewhat interesting, though, even though I'd never used it. If you pressed this specific couple of keys, it would start ringing like someone was calling you. It was meant to be used when you wanted to simulate getting a call to get out of a boring conversation or tough situation. I clumsily pressed those keys and the phone started ringing. I quickly shut it up, but now it had become clear inside the apartment that I was awake. If someone was outside my bedroom, they had certainly heard it. What was going to happen now? I stopped for a few moments to observe my surroundings. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead quiet. I decided to continue with my plan. I dialed 911 with one hand and raised the broomstick with the other. I quickly shoved open the door. As soon as I'd done that, I saw someone sprint in front of me in the corridor and quickly go into the kitchen, closing the door behind them. "Hey!" I screamed and started pursuing, but a split second later I thought, stop, what if there's someone else in the apartment? What if another intruder sneaks up from behind or something? In front of me was that long corridor to the kitchen, but to my left was another that led to the living room and office. The office had the light on, so the intruder must have been in there, but I didn't know if he had company or not. I took a step back to the entrance of my room, so I wouldn't be able to be caught off guard. "Sir, are you there?" The 911 operator called me on the phone. I quickly explained to him what was happening, gave him my address, and he told me the police were on their way. It seemed they had a patrol car nearby, so all I had to do was wait. Then the operator hung up. The apartment was dead silent. I was terrified. There were only 3 things I had been able to notice about the intruder. He had a light-colored sweatshirt with black horizontal lines, dark hair, and he smelled really bad. In fact, the smell was still in the apartment, and I could still sense it. The police arrived after 7 or 8 minutes, which felt like ages. The apartment door was next to the bedroom, so I managed to quickly approach it and unlock the door to let them in. I explained what had happened to the police, and they said we should go through the whole apartment and check every single hiding place. There had been situations where a burglar had hidden themselves for a long period, even after the homeowners had called the police, only to later attack them. The apartment wasn't very big, so it was easy to conclude that no one else was hiding there. In the kitchen, it was obvious what had happened. It had these large windows that faced the back of the building, where we had a small community garden. I had left one of the windows open, and next to it on the outside, there was a large drain pipe along the wall. It seemed the intruder had used that pipe to climb my window and get in. The police left to go look around the neighborhood for someone matching the description of the sweatshirt I described. While they were gone, I could still smell that horrible odor the intruder had left in my apartment. After around 20 minutes, the cops came back. Seems they couldn't find anyone. The burglar was already long gone. Luckily, he didn't have a chance to steal anything while he was in there. But the audacity! I mean, he must have seen the light on in my bedroom through the edges of the door, and still he tried walking past it to steal something from my office. I didn't sleep well that night. In the morning, I went to the garden in the back to try and find any further clues about the intruder, but I couldn't find anything. A neighbor in the building next door was at the window, and I called out to her. I told her what happened, and she just smiled and said, "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. We all have stories like that in this place. You should never leave your windows open. Maybe you should even consider getting some bars to protect them." The next day, I bought a motion alarm and installed it in the kitchen. I never had another experience like that in that apartment, but to be honest, I never slept the same way in that bedroom, traumatized by those events. At night, I would fear hearing the sound of the kitchen door snapping out of its place once again. A few years later, I moved out into a larger apartment in another neighborhood. This time, though, it was on the 7th floor, so I didn't have to worry about intruders getting in through the windows.
Pawn shops get a really bad reputation that they don't deserve, honestly. Movies make it seem like it's easy to sell stolen goods there, and they make it seem like pawn shops are all dangerous, that only low-life people get loans at them, and that pawn shop workers are seedy and only interested in cheating people out of their money. My very first job was at a pawn shop, and I still work there today, actually. I've been there for a good 14 years, too. However, I did almost quit shortly after I began working there. I had this really frightening incident. When I was first hired at the shop, I was hired to work the overnight shift. I thought it would be pretty cool because it would be slow, and I could spend my time playing around on my Game Boy the entire time. Although there were definitely customers who came into the shop that late, there really weren't too many. Some were a little bit sketchy, I have to admit, but they didn't actually come completely into the shop. There was a little foyer that was locked overnight, and we conducted transactions through a glass teller window. About a month after I had first started, I was there with one other employee. It was her lunch break, and she went and had something to eat in the back room. We were technically not supposed to leave the building at night, not even for our break. About the time that she went on her break, I saw a car pull up into the parking lot. We were the only business in the strip mall that was open that late, so I expected someone to come up to the shop to pawn something, but instead the car just sat there. Occasionally, the driver would start the car, turn the lights on, let it idle for a minute or two, and then turn it off once again. Occasionally, the driver would start the car, turn the lights on, let it idle for a minute or two, and then turn it off once again. I had no idea what he was doing, and I just thought it was really weird. I tried not to let it bother me, though. Finally, after a while, the man got out of the car. He walked with a slight limp. I remember that. He walked up onto the sidewalk right in front of the store. He looked through the door, but didn't reach for it. Instead, he walked away from the shop, but not back to his car. He walked down the sidewalk of the storefront. After a few moments, I saw him walk back the other direction. He looked into the opening once again, but didn't indicate that he was going to come in at all. So yeah, this behavior was already really weird and setting off some alarm bells. Keep in mind, though, this was my first job ever, and I had only been on the job for a month or so. I really wasn't sure what to do in this situation, or if I really even should be worried. The next time the guy came back, though, he came into the door. He walked right up to me, and he seemed very nervous. He asked me if I could let him into the store. I told him we didn't allow people in after hours. If he wanted to pawn something, he'd have to go on and do it through the window. He told me he didn't exactly want to pawn something. He wanted to pick a gold watch that he had on pawn. I told him he'd have to come back in the morning to do that, because our jewelry safe was on a time lock, and we didn't do transactions like that overnight. He began getting extremely irritated with me. He told me he just needed his watch back, and that I needed to get it for him right now. The more I insisted that I couldn't, his irritation slowly began turning into rage. He started threatening me, first telling me he would call the cops and have me arrested for not giving him his property. Well, I knew that was a load of bull, because it just didn't work that way. When I told him as much, he threatened to break through the glass and get it himself. That was also impossible, and I told him that much as well. The man became extremely angry and started pounding on the window. His face was the deepest shade of red I had ever seen a human face get. I reached for the phone and told him I was going to call the police. When I said that, he cursed at me, ran out the door, got into his car, and drove away. I ended up not calling the police since he had already left. This happened at around 1:30 a.m. My coworker came back soon after that. At about 3 a.m., I decided to finally go on my break. I decided I wanted to go and get some Taco Bell. I went to the back door and opened it. As I had the door partway opened, I looked up and saw the car from earlier parked in the back lot. I then noticed movement behind the door as I saw a hand grab for it immediately to hold it open. I pulled back, jamming the man's hand in the door frame. He screamed and let go of the door, allowing me to close it. He then began wailing, screaming and attacking the back door, demanding I open up and let him in, or else he would kill me. This time I took the phone and did call the police. My boss was called in, and it turns out this guy had pawned a gold watch and never paid on it. He had been in during the day several times trying to get it back, but of course was turned down each time. I guess he thought there was some way he could get away with it at night, force it if he had to. Thank God he was wrong.
What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run two other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.